Okay, so here's a headline. President Trump wants to rebuild and reopen Alcatraz prison. Right out of the gate, that definitely catches your ear.
It really does. I mean, Alcatraz, it evokes so much, doesn't it?
Oh,
What it
yeah.
was, what it is now.
Exactly. And, if you're someone who's fascinated by those stories of infamous prisons or maybe the history hidden inside landmarks, well, this is right up your alley. You shared some really interesting sources about this directive. So our plan today is to unpack it.
Yeah, understand the why behind it, the history it connects to, and, well, the sheer complexity of it all.
There's definitely a lot to get into.
Hmm.
So, okay, let's start with the announcement itself. This came out on Truth Social initially.
That's right. He posted that he's directing the Bureau of Prisons to, I'm quoting here, rebuild and open Alcatraz. His stated reason, to house America's most ruthless and violent offenders.
And he linked it to the past somehow.
Yeah, he did. He mentioned being a more serious nation back then, sort of implying reopening Alcatraz would be a return to that.
A symbol. And did he say anything else, like to reporters?
He did, yeah. When he got back to the White House, reporters asked, and he described it as just an idea I've had, but then he also clearly called it a symbol of law and order.
Just an idea, but one that tasks the Bureau of Prisons, DOJ, FBI, Homeland Security.
Right, with reopening a substantially enlarged and rebuilt Alcatraz. That's more than just a passing thought, you'd think.
Seems like it indicates a pretty serious level of intent, at least initially.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Alcatraz, we all have this image, right? The inescapable prison on the rock. But that wasn't his first job, was it?
No, not at all. Its story starts way earlier. The island itself, I mean, look where it is, right in the mouth of San Francisco Bay. Strategically vital.
For defense, you mean?
Exactly. Back in the 1850s, the U.S. Army built a fort there, put in artillery, the whole setup. The idea was, well, protection against ships, foreign invaders. Later, even Confederate raiders during the Civil War. California was becoming important.
So a military base first. When did the shift to, prison happen?
It was gradual. It became a military prison, sort of evolved into that role in the early 20th century. But the big change was 1933.
What happened then?
The Army handed it over, transferred control to the Department of Justice. And that's when the federal penitentiary era really begins.
Yeah.
The one everyone knows.
Right. The nearly 30 years it was the federal prison,
Mm-hmm.
and that nickname, The Rock. That wasn't accidental, was it? It felt intentional.
Oh, completely intentional. The Rock was all about projecting an image. Impregnable, tough, severe. The government in the 20s and 30s dealing with high crime rates.
Prohibition gangsters and all
Yeah,
that.
exactly. They wanted to send a message, we're serious, we're cracking down. And Alcatraz, this maximum security, minimum privilege place, that was the symbol. This is where the worst of the worst end up.
So who did end up there? What kind of inmate got sent to Alcatraz?
It wasn't just any federal prisoner. It was specifically designed for the, quote, most incorrigible inmates, meaning the ones who were constant troublemakers elsewhere. Discipline problems, escape risks, the ones other federal prisons just couldn't handle. They were seen as the biggest security threats in the whole system.
And life inside. I understand the basic rights were very limited.
Extremely limited. Basically, you were guaranteed food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. That's it. Anything else, visits, access to the library, work assignments, those were privileges. You had to earn them through good behavior.
Tough regime. But for all its fame, it wasn't actually a huge prison population-wise, was it?
No, that's a really interesting point. It typically held maybe 260 to 275 prisoners at any given time.
Which sounds like a lot, but in the grand scheme.
It was tiny, less than 1% of the total federal inmate population back then. Its impact was more symbolic, I think, than sheer numbers.
Still, some very famous names passed through its gates.
Oh, definitely. You had Al Capone, probably the most famous, George Machine Gun Kelly. Later on, James Whitey Bulger spent time there.
And Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz.
Right, Robert Stroud. Though the Birdman story has that famous twist, doesn't it?
Yeah, the name came from his time before Alcatraz, right? At Leavenworth.
Exactly. He did all that research, wrote books on canaries and their diseases while he was at Leavenworth, became this, self-taught ornithologist. But when they transferred him to Alcatraz in 42,
No more birds.
no more birds, the authorities put a stop to it. Part of the reason, apparently, was they suspected he'd used some of his bird study equipment to build a makeshift alcohol still previously.
Wow, okay. Talk about resourcefulness. Maybe not in the way they hoped.
Hey, perhaps. But yeah, no birds allowed on the rock for the Birdman.
Now, that reputation, inescapable, was it true, or was it more, legend built up?
Well, it was definitely part of the prison's whole aura. The island isolation, the freezing cold water, those treacherous currents in the bay. It all fed into the idea that escape was impossible.
And officially, did anyone ever make it?
Officially, no.
Yeah.
The record states 0 successful escapes from Alcatraz during his time as a federal pen.
But people tried.
Oh, absolutely. Over those 29 years, they recorded 14 separate escape attempts. Involved 36 different men.
And the most famous attempt, the one everyone knows, probably from the movie, Morris and the Anglin brothers in 1962.
That's the one. It really was like something out of a film. So elaborate. The FBI even called their plan ingenious.
What did they actually do? It involved spoons, right?
It did. Spoons, yeah, and other homemade tools. They even apparently made a drill from like a vacuum cleaner motor. Over months, very slowly, patiently, they chipped away at the concrete around the ventilation ducts in their cells.
What to get into?
An unused service corridor behind the cells.
Oh.
Gave them a way out of the main cell block.
And the fake heads. The detail always gets me.
Incredible, isn't it? Made them from like a mix of concrete dust, soap, maybe some paint,
Oh.
and used real human hair from the prison barbershop. Left them in their bunks.
To fool the guards during the night counts.
Exactly, while they were making their way out. And then there was the raft.
Made from raincoats.
Over 50 stolen raincoats, yeah. They painstakingly glued or stitched them together, used heat from steam pipes to seal the seams, apparently. Made life vests, too. Just think about the planning, the patience, the risk,
Ooh.
all with really basic materials.
It's amazing. So what happened? Did they make it?
Well, they got out of their cells, through the vents, climbed up, got to the roof, down to the shore,
Yeah.
and they launched their raft into the bay. That much seems clear.
But then...
There wasn't. Mystery. The FBI investigated for years. Their official conclusion was that they most likely drowned. The water's incredibly cold, the currents are strong.
But no bodies were ever found.
Never definitively recovered. And because of that, rumors persisted, alleged sightings over the years. The case technically stayed open for decades,
Yeah.
so officially drowned. But the question mark remains. It adds to the whole Alcatraz legend.
So if it was this supposedly perfect, inescapable prison, why close it down? It only operated as a federal prison until 1963.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, maybe,
Yeah.
but there were two really big practical reasons. First, cost. Just astronomical operating cost. Because it's an island, everything had to be shipped in food, supplies, even fresh water. Staff had to commute by boat. It ended up costing almost 3 times as much to run per inmate compared to other federal prisons on the mainland.
Wow, 3 times. That's significant.
Hugely significant. And the second reason was the building itself. It was literally crumbling.
From a sea air.
Exactly. All that salt spray, the fog,
Yeah.
it just corroded the concrete and steel structures relentlessly. By the early 60s, the place was falling apart. Estimates back then said it would take maybe $3 to $5 million just for repairs and restoration.
Which was a huge amount of money back then.
Massive. And that didn't even include the already sky-high day-to-day operating costs. So financially, it just wasn't sustainable anymore.
Makes sense. Just too expensive and too rundown. So 1963, the cells empty out. What happens to the island then? Does it just sit there?
For a little while, yeah, it was sort of unused, uncertain what to do with it. But then in 1969, something really significant happened.
The Native American occupation.
That's right. A group of Native American activists, calling themselves Indians of all tribes, landed on the island and occupied it.
How long did that last?
For 19 months. It was a major protest, drawing attention to Native American rights and treaty issues. They claimed the island under the terms of the old Treaty of Fort Laramie, which said retired federal land could be claimed by Native people.
That's a really crucial part of its more recent history. And today, what's its status now?
Today, it's run by the National Park Service, and it's huge, a massive tourist attraction.
I've heard the tours are incredibly popular.
Hugely. They get something like 1.2 million visitors every single year coming to see the old prison. And it's also a National Historic Landmark.
What does that designation mean, practically speaking?
It means it's officially recognized by the federal government for its historical significance. That usually comes with protections, makes it harder to, say, tear it down or make major changes, like rebuilding a prison on it.
Although those designations aren't always permanent, are they?
No, they can technically be withdrawn if the site loses the qualities that made it historic or under other specific conditions. But it adds another layer of complexity to any plan like this.
Which loops us right back to the proposal to reopen it. What's the reaction been like? I saw Nancy Pelosi had something to say. Her district includes Alcatraz, right?
It does. And yeah, she weighed in pretty directly. She basically dismissed the idea, called it not a serious one.
Your reasoning.
She pointed out it's been closed for, over 60 years, and now it's this incredibly popular national park, a big draw for tourism, important economically, essentially saying that ship has sailed.
Beyond the politics, what are the actual, physical hurdles to reopening it, assuming someone really wanted to push this?
So they're massive. First off, cost. If it was wildly expensive back in the 60s, imagine now, especially with the idea of substantially enlarging and rebuilding it. We're talking huge figures, likely far beyond that original $3 to $5 million restoration estimate.
And the logistics.
It's still a nightmare. Running a modern, high-security prison on an island, getting staff there, supplies, prisoners, security boats. It's just inherently complex and expensive.
Plus the whole National Historic Landmark status we mentioned.
Right, and disrupting a major tourist site that brings in millions of dollars and over 1 million visitors a year. There'd be significant pushback on that front, too, you'd imagine.
So you've got this clash. Trump's emphasis on the symbolism, law, order, justice, spelled out like that, versus the practical costs, the logistics, the history, its current identity as a park. It kind of makes you wonder how much weight that symbolism carries for people today compared to the reality of the place.
That's a great question. Does the symbol still resonate in the way it's intended, given everything else we know about Alcatraz now?
Okay, let's just quickly pull the threads together. We started with the directive of President Trump wanting to rebuild and reopen Alcatraz, housing the most ruthless and violent, hearkening back to a more serious time.
Then we went back, saw it start as a military fort, crucial for defense.
Right. Before becoming the Rock, the federal pen for the incorrigibles like Capone and Machine Gun Kelly, we talked about the limited rights, the small population, but big reputation.
Now the escapes, especially Morse and the Anglins in '62, the ingenuity, the mystery of whether they survived.
Which led to why it closed. Just too expensive to run, too expensive to fix the crumbling buildings.
Then the Native American occupation, a vital chapter. And finally, its current life as this incredibly popular National Park Service site and historic landmark.
And the reaction to the reopening idea, Pelosi dismissing it, the huge practical challenges of cost, logistics, and its current status.
What really stands out is that complete flip in perception from this place of ultimate dread and punishment
to a must-see tourist spot.
Yeah. That shift is just fascinating. It really tells a story about how we view history, punishment, and even landmarks over time.
Absolutely. That contrast really hits home. The feared prison versus the popular park. It forces you to see all those layers of history and meaning wrapped up in this proposal. And hopefully for you listening, this deep dive, looking at the sources you shared, gives a clearer picture of everything swirling around this announcement, especially when you think about those past cost issues. Trying to rebuild and enlarge it now, the price tag discussion alone would be immense.
It really forces a conversation about how we value historical sites versus, contemporary political goals or symbols. Where's the balance?
Definitely food for thought. So here's something to mull over. Considering Alcatraz's whole story, why it was built, why it was closed, what it became, what does proposing its return as a prison really symbolize today? And what might the ripple effects be, not just for the justice system, but for how we treat our history?